Hi, everyone. My name is Julie Stigmeyer, and I work for the Graduate School of Education and Psychology in writing support at Pepperdine University. Today, I'm going to share information about how to write a literature review. I'll present this information in 4 steps: how to synthesize, how to organize research, how to structure a literature review, and how to apply synthesis. First, let's talk about how to synthesize. When we think about different writing skills, one that's vitally important, especially for research writing, is paraphrasing. Paraphrasing refers to restating another's idea in your own words, which allows the writer to summarize and synthesize information from one or more sources, focus on significant information, and compare and contrast relevant details. So paraphrasing is a very important writing skill, and it is different from adding in direct quotes from outside sources. Paraphrasing is usually the preferred method of including research in writing at the graduate level. And partly that's because of all this flexibility it gives you. You can summarize, synthesize, focus on what's significant without having to include words that are not significant from a quotation. And it helps you to compare and contrast relevant details. And summarizing is a type of paraphrasing. It takes a large amount of information and makes it small, reducing it to its main points. Whereas synthesizing is a little different. It is looking at multiple sources and then pulling those together into a new coherent whole. So if you are summarizing, you might be giving 3 or 4 sentences as a summary of a 20-page research study. So you reduce it from a big amount of information to a small amount of information. Whereas synthesizing looks at, say, 10 different research studies and then figures out how to organize that information and present it to the reader as a new coherent whole, identifying all of those research studies. And this is really the main skill that you would be using when you're writing a literature review. Synthesis occurs on multiple levels. It occurs at the project level, where you are identifying your topic and kind of organizing all of your studies together. And often those appear in sections. So when research studies that are of similar content emerge, then you capture that within a section of the paper, and that's synthesizing. We also synthesize at the paragraph level and the sentence level. So I'll give you some examples of those a bit later. The second part of this presentation is how to organize your research. So now that we understand what synthesis is and that that's the skill you're going to be using, the next part is thinking about how to take all those different research studies and organize them into something that presents these trends or themes. So the purpose of a literature review, this is from the APA 7th edition style guide, is to define and clarify the problem, whatever the topic is. You define and clarify the problem. You summarize previous investigations to inform readers of the state of the research and identify relations, contradictions, gaps, and inconsistency in the literature, and suggest next steps in solving the problem. So I like this definition from the APA because it almost exactly follows the outline of a typical literature review. I'll go into more depth in that in a minute, but I just want to show you, often in your introduction, you will define and clarify the problem. So you might look up statistics of, how many individuals does this situation occur? How often does this occur among how many individuals? Maybe a little bit of background of the topic. So that's your intro. Then this is the body of the paper, the lit review, where you summarize previous investigations. So what is that research showing? And how is that, what that's like presenting the state of the research? And then in your discussion, you identify relations, contradictions, gaps, and inconsistencies in the literature. And so that's your discussion section. And then you also in the discussion, you suggest next steps. So what still needs to be researched? Are there policies that need to be enacted? That kind of thing. So I like to look at an example topic. It's a very simple topic, the benefits of gratitude interventions. And what I've put here on this slide are just a brief statement of the findings from each of these different studies. Okay. And they're all under this bigger umbrella topic of gratitude interventions and the effects or impacts of those. However, within that, under that umbrella, this presents unorganized or kind of scattered research. So let me just go through a couple of these. So like gratefulness is an important positive emotion that contributes to subjective well-being through increased social connectedness and greater presence of meaning in life. Okay, so there's social connectedness identified here, subjective well-being. The Dykert et al. Study shows that participants had a greater sense of appreciation for others, also lower levels of depressive and physical symptoms when experiencing stress. Algo and Way indicated improvement in frequency of expressions, romantic relationship, satisfaction. Okay, so we can see like there are some subtopics within this. Social connectedness. Here's another one on relationships. Here's one on relationships. This one on depressive factors or depressive symptoms is echoed down here. So you kind of start with just, findings based on the bigger topic. And then what you can do is start color coding or somehow providing a kind of organizational tool to help you identify what those subtopics are. And then you gather those subtopics together into the sections of your literature review. So you can see these 3 studies all relate to relationship satisfaction, social connectedness. So I would put these 3 together into a section in the paper. The yellow indicate it improved subjective well-being, and the blue highlight shows a decrease in depressive symptoms. So then this is what would emerge as my synthesis of these 10 or so studies. So I synthesized theme 1, that gratitude interventions may improve life satisfaction and subjective well-being. And there are these 3 studies that support that finding. Gratitude interventions may strengthen relationships. So here I have 4 studies to support that. And this is a protective factor against depressive symptoms and 3 studies. So then what I would do is in the main part of my lit review, I would write about 2 pages on each of these themes and tell the differences and the similarities, compare and contrast, what do these studies have in common and how are they different? And that kind of gets us to our outline. So with, like I mentioned on that definition from the APA of or purpose of literature reviews, your introduction often is a little bit lengthy. So these numbers are based on about a 10-page literature review. And you might have 1 or 1.5 pages used to address these introductory statements. Broad statements that provide context for the topic. So in my case, I might say, how many individuals experience depression and how gratitude can benefit them. So that might be an example of how you could do that. And just kind of giving the history of gratitude interventions and how did this come to be and is it widely used, that kind of thing. Then I'd usually define the purpose of the literature review, which is basically a research question just stated as a statement. So the purpose of this literature review is to explore the benefits of gratitude interventions. Pretty straightforward. If there are any key terms that need to be identified, you mention that next. And then you would add your overview statement. And what this is like a thesis, but it helps to also include a blueprint or a preview of what your themes are going to be. So I'll show you more about that in a moment. So if this was 1 to 1.5 pages, this section in a 10-page literature review would be about 7 pages. So this is really the bulk of your paper. And like I showed you with my example, I start with an introduction to that first sub-theme, which is about subjective well-being, and then synthesize and discuss in several paragraphs all the studies related to that, and then go on to the next 2 as well. For a 10-page lit review, I find that 3 themes is all you can really cover. So that might be a good number to shoot for if that's in what your situation requires. And then at the end of the literature review are these 2 sections, the discussion and then a brief conclusion. The discussion evaluates and critiques the literature. What are the strengths and limitations? What are the contributions to the field? So this is where you're talking about the research you found. And in reading and really becoming familiar with that, then you can analyze and critically think about what are the inconsistencies? What are the gaps? What is strong about the literature? Is there a target population that hasn't been discussed? So those are kind of some of the things you can discuss there. And then the implications. So what does this mean? What does this body of research mean for future research practice or policy? So this section is maybe, it depends, but I usually see students write at least 2 to 3 paragraphs on this section. And then usually the conclusion can be fairly brief, just summarizing the main themes and answering a question like, so what? So what does all this mean? For therapists, it might mean that they need to become more aware of how to serve this population and be more effective in therapy. That could be an answer to your so what question. I mentioned the overview statement. This comes at the end of the introduction. It's a single sentence that encapsulates all the ideas in the paper. It states the topic and gives the roadmap or blueprint of the breakdown. And it's like a thesis, but considered an overview because it's not an argument. It's just a presentation of how you will present the information. So here's an example of a overview statement. The effects of gratitude interventions. So here is my topic, and then include, and here's my blueprint. Improve life satisfaction, strengthen social relationships, and decrease depressive symptoms. So these 3 highlights correspond with the previous color-coded information I showed you earlier. And then what this suggests is that the paper will be divided into 3 main parts. How gratitude interventions improve life satisfaction or subjective well-being, strengthen social relationships, and decrease depressive symptoms. And then these could work as headings in that section of your paper as well. So I might say maybe this heading could become gratitude interventions and improved life satisfaction. This heading could be gratitude interventions and strengthened social relationships. and so on. So then you not only have the overview statement showing the reader what's coming in these three major sections, but you also include headings that help the reader to see, okay, what's the next big section going to be like? And for APA formatting, you would center and bold those using title case. So the last part of the presentation is how to apply synthesis at the paragraph level and at the sentence level. I'd like to share a strategy that works really well for most academic writing, no matter what the level, from high school, even middle school, until, all the way through for doctoral work. It's called the meal plan, and this is an acronym that's been around a while to just help students understand how to arrange and develop their paragraphs. So the idea here is that we have these four letters, and they stand for the main idea, examples and evidence, analysis, and link back to the main claim. So in a paragraph of, I don't know, 5 to 8 sentences, the first sentence would be your main idea, where you present the claim or central idea of the paragraph. You might have a citation here, but you might not. If you just state the basics of your topic in this paragraph, you might not need citation. But then here is where you would definitely be inserting those paraphrases, examples, scholarly evidence, and that's where you would include a lot of citation. And then, so maybe this is sentence 1, this is maybe sentences 2 to 4 or something like that. And then your A, analysis, you could start a sentence by saying, this shows that, or this research highlights that, and then you kind of discuss how that fits back with the claim or the main idea. And then the last sentence is a link back to the main claim. So here you conclude kind of restating what that main idea said. So that's the meal plan, and I think it's a really helpful tool for developing paragraphs. And here's a sample paragraph that kind of shows what this looks like in a real paragraph. So this is a book by Stephen Covey, The Speed of Trust, published in 2018. And I'll just read this and then kind of point out some meal plan structure to it. While it may come naturally for us to think of trust in terms of character, it's equally important that we also learn to think in terms of competence. Think about it. People trust people who make things happen. They give the new curriculum to their most competent instructors. They give promising projects or sales leads to those who have delivered in the past. Recognizing the role of competence helps us identify and give language to underlying trust issues we otherwise can't put a finger on. From a line leader's perspective, the competence dimension rounds out and helps give trust its harder, more pragmatic edge. So you can see it's a fairly short paragraph. I think it's maybe 6 sentences, maybe 5. And it's written at a popular level. So this is a popular book. But I think it captures this structure pretty well. And let me just show you a couple of things here. If I were to break this down, this would be my M. And in this statement, there are 2 terms that are really important: trust and competence. And you can see that this idea of competence, or something kind of like it, appear throughout the paragraph. And yet it doesn't feel repetitive. It's actually pointing to those key terms more than once to help the reader understand how this main idea can be expressed through all these examples. So here's our main idea, and then we have 3 sentences that give examples or evidence. These are all examples. So think about it. People trust people who make things happen. So here's an example. They give the new curriculum to their most competent instructors. They give promising projects or sales leads to those who've delivered in the past. And then here's a little analysis from the author. Recognizing the role of competence helps us identify and give language to underlying trust issues. And then finally, there's a L or link referring to competence again and trust. So it's a nicely developed, very popular resource from a popular resource, but I think it helps to demonstrate how this flows. And that's how you use synthesis at the paragraph level. At the sentence level, we can look at it in another way. This is another example of a meal paragraph where we have a main idea about the definition of subjective well-being, and then how there are different factors in this construct, including one set of components referring to life satisfaction. So this paragraph is defining subjective well-being, and one component of that is life satisfaction. And then we have a sentence here that shows, the definition of that term, life satisfaction. And then we have 3 sources who support that. And then another example or evidence here from Ross, and then another one here from the WHO. So this paragraph, sometimes paragraphs don't have to have that A analysis, and this one doesn't. We have an M, E, 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 and then the L. Sometimes the L and the A can be combined in a final sentence. So that's the paragraph structure here, but important for us to look at now is the sentence level synthesis, which is shown in this sentence. So here we have a definition of life satisfaction, and that came from these 3 sources: Diner, 2000, Ross et al. 2020, and the WHO 2012. And what this means is that these 3 sources all had the same finding about what life satisfaction means. And because they had that in common, I was able to include all 3 sources in this multiple citation. And when you do that in a literature review, it's very common in a literature review, often with definitions, because it really helps to show, that comparing and contrasting that the synthesis allows you to do. And on a practical level, with APA formatting, you include the sources alphabetically by the last name of the first author. So here, Diner comes first because of D, then Ross because of R, and then W here. And then you separate them with semicolons. So if you can use synthesis on all of those levels, you'll really have created an excellent literature review, from the project to the section level, to the paragraph to the sentence. So I encourage you to really use that tool to the best of your ability. And here is information for GSEP writing support. This is our website where you can go not only for resources, but also to set up appointments for direct feedback on your work. This website's very helpful to use when you have quick APA questions. It's not as thorough as the style manual, but it'll get you quite a bit of information. And then we always like to encourage students to use Grammarly, which is a proofreading tool. And for Pepperdine students, you can access a premium account through your tuition dollars. So please know that GSEP writing support is here for you, and we'd be happy to assist you with your literature review as you're working through that important assignment in the program. Thanks for paying attention and listening, and see you next time.